October is Halloween season, and nothing says scary like playing through bad games. There are few games in the world that can embody awful in the same way that Superman 64 has. This is a game that reflects terribleness in a way that belongs in a book. It is so iconically bad that it makes an example for bad games alongside names such as Big Rigs, over-the-road racing. Except for the fact that you generally don't want to make bad games. Of course, it's one thing to make jokes about how awful a game is, but what are some of the reasons behind this image? Why is Superman 64 so terrible? As a gaming experience, so many aspects of it are flawed. It is, with regards to graphics, underwhelming. Very underwhelming. Highly blocky and polygonal, and with no charm to help sell the blandness of what players interact with and see. The story of the game involves Superman navigating a virtual world constructed by Lex Luthor, within which there are 14 levels, 7 each for ride and maze types. The former sees Superman flying through rings and accomplishing other objectives while doing so within a time limit. The latter involves Superman rescuing one of his friends that are trapped within the virtual world and then fighting a boss. One from the Man of Steel's Rogues Gallery. Serviceable enough as an idea, but maybe restricting as a concept, though the idea of flying through rings and navigating mazes seems silly still. Then we get to the really bad parts. Controls for the game aren't properly functional. Flight is activated by pressing the Z button, but the game will not properly respond to this immediately, and flight activation often takes multiple presses. The Z button's also required to land, and considering that the game doesn't always register the need to land and fly properly, this makes accomplishing what would otherwise have been a cool and ideally basic task much more of a trial than it should be. Flying around a 3D environment should be fun, not a chore. Superman's flight isn't even properly controllable while in the air either, as he won't turn as you want him to. That aside, the game has a lot of bugs and quality of life issues that impede proper play. Draw distance for the game's limited, and fog is everywhere to help mask that. There's only life in the world within about a stone's throw from Superman himself at any given moment. Neither glasses nor X-ray vision do anything to help. Strangely, the developers explain the limited draw distance and a restriction of Superman's abilities by saying that there is kryptonite fog in the world. This is how Superman's access to basic abilities such as X-ray vision and ice breath is restricted by collecting them as power-ups. But why and how is there kryptonite fog in a virtual world? And why not just limit Superman's abilities further? The idea is already bad enough, but the execution we see here just seems arbitrary. Pathetic attempts at explaining poor game experience aside though, this concept just makes no sense. Anyway, the game has issues with collision detection all over the place too. It'll frequently fail to register the player's desire to pick up objects or to interact with walls properly. There are inconsistencies in frame rates, animations for things such as attacks are very stiff, and let's just stress that while these may seem like technical descriptions of problems, what this creates is a gameplay experience that just doesn't, well, work. If there were a game design school and all you saw in class were how-tos of collision detection and definitions of what such terms as collision detection even means, it may be boring to some people. Superman 64, though, is an example of why you should take such lessons very seriously. This is not a game that anyone should want to play. There are glitches all over the place. The multiplayer experiences on offer are, well, beyond comprehension. You play as Lex Luthor's spaceships and compete in either a racing or a battle mode. In the racing mode, players can shoot rings from their own backside. Not from the front, but from the back. Why? This is such a strange decision and it makes aiming cumbersome. In racing mode, what purpose does the ability, or restriction rather, of firing backwards serve to the person who is in last place? As for the battle mode, players utilize various weapons to defeat other opponents, but this is all executed with the bare minimum of effort. Strangely, the frame rate is better in multiplayer mode than it is in the scenario campaign, but this is maybe connected to the even more low effort graphical rendering that we see here, perhaps done to allow for multiple players on the same map. Sadly, the writing was on the wall for this game way before it was released. The launch date for Superman 64 was actually delayed by 1 whole year, as negative reception from playtesters at E3 1998 prompted a pushback. Cited problems included frame rate issues and poorly responsive controls. Lo and behold, you can find these same problems in the final release still. The story of this game all starts with the now defunct Titus Interactive securing the license for Superman 64 in 1997, and they were to develop games across major platforms including the Nintendo 64, Game Boy, PlayStation, and the Sega Saturn. Superman 64 was announced at E3 97, 1 year prior to E3 98. Incidentally, it turned out that the developers had great ambitions for the game, setting out to make a game that captures the feeling of being a superhero. But Warner Bros. And DC Comics had strong stipulations in place for what the game had to be. It had to take place in a virtual reality world so that Superman wouldn't hurt real humans, and Superman's powers had to be limited. There's something interesting to be said about the second stipulation, as Superman's horrifically strong by design. Theoretically, he should be able to collapse buildings just by leaning too heavily on it. In daily citizen life, Superman is always withholding. This isn't seen to nearly the same degree as it is with Batman or Spider-Man. As for the other stipulation though, even if you didn't want Superman to hurt humans, you don't have to set the world in virtual reality. As it is, the game already sees him set against a bunch of foes from his rogues gallery. He has so many abilities, how are they going to be displayed if not used in combat? In any case, there were competing visions for what the game was supposed to be between the developers themselves and the licensors, and this strain led to the developers not being able to produce something coherent in spite of the delay. And that's our video on why Superman 64 is just a bad game. This is a game that sets the bar for every other game in the world to walk all over, and any title that is in Superman 64's company, as far as quality goes, is something that should obviously be avoided. Poor quality of this caliber is pretty irregular, thankfully, because people who are sane understand that game management and development like this will likely lead to people losing their jobs, or having difficulty being contracted to find work, and damaging IPs or game brands. The confluence of badness is astounding. We have no choice but to blame Lex Luthor not only for kidnapping Superman's friends, but for making Superman and the rest of us suffer through even giving this title a second of our attention. Were you one of the poor souls unfortunate enough to play this game? Well, tell us your experience in the comment section below, and if you haven't played this game before, tell us if you're the type of person that, presented with the opportunity, would be willing to maybe play this game simply for the sake of personal curiosity, for absolutely no money. While bad games can be fun to play through for some, even when there's video game titles with cheesy plots, or for which the entertainment value of watching an exasperated player is just hilarious, Superman 64 is just not functional. Other bad games may have redeeming qualities, like a nice soundtrack or good artwork, or even excellent battle systems, a strong point that can help players trudge through the mediocrity of everything else. But Superman 64's best points are only mediocre. This is, simply put, not good. Do you think there are more bad games now than there were in the past, or do you think game development and output is improving overall? Let us know in the comments below. And that wraps it up. If you like what we're doing, please consider subscribing to our channel. We upload new videos daily. Also, don't forget to switch on the bell notification icon, that way you don't miss out on any of our videos.